Welcome back. We have Tim Alexander here. And Tim, your blog, you've got some interesting titles for some of the blogs you want to talk about today. The Ebola, I guess you call the Red Death. I think it's already shutting down right across Africa. We have no public health measures recommended by the World Health Organization to either change flights or prevent people from coming in any way, shape, or form, boat or otherwise, from these African nations with Ebola. We have no scientific or lab data to indicate how long the virus lasts on a dry surface, or if there's mucus spread or droplet spray, how far it goes, or can they infect someone in an airplane or a boat or a train. We know it's probably...
We have not formal studies to that effect. But
we have observations that make us very suspicious.
We know, for instance, 4 people on the plane that carried one of the Ebola victims came down with the disease. So we have circumstantial evidence that's pretty strong to indicate it's airborne now. Australia just released a statement that it is airborne.
But nobody's doing anything about that. I could have guessed that. And I said months ago that when Ebola first came out, that they needed to stop all people coming in from any of these African countries. If they've been resident in any of these countries, even for a day, they need to be quarantined for a month. And it doesn't matter if they fly in, come in a boat, come in a raft. I don't care how they get here.
Well, and they better be quarantined in a facility that is really up to stuff, because so far 170 healthcare workers have died. Now, you know, considering it's Africa and healthcare standards are much lower, but in many cases these people have had special protection on from head to foot. They don't
have negative pressure suits, though. If you have what's called biohazard suit on, there's no. The problem is what they had was
BioWar agent, and
right.
You know, it's so hot and so dangerous that it needs to be in a deep facility with negative pressure suits with a micro nuke, so that if it gets out, somebody pushes the plunger and everything turns to several million degrees very quickly.
Let me tell you a story. 1972, I was sitting down with my professor, Robert Brown, who was actually trained as a bioweaponeer. He worked on the Tvirus. If anybody hears about video games about the Tvirus, Tvirus was composed of 2 binary viruses combined, a capsid and injector core. The injector core was able to cause neuromuscular paralysis. So one canister of 4.5 pounds, which is several kilograms, at 40,000 feet, and this is a quote, would kill in the Boston to Washington corridor 4.5 to 6 million people. Once you get it, you are paralyzed and you suffocate. Not from a belt around your neck like Robin Williams, but because you suffocate because you have neuromuscular paralysis, you can't breathe. The fact is that the virus got out of containment one day when my colleague, Dr. Brown, was actually home sick with the flu, which is the first time in 10 years. And all his colleagues were basically locked in, because it's a Class 4 installation, automatically locked down. They were then incinerated at 2,000 degrees by auto incinerators. 2,000 degrees, not 20 million. You just need 2,000 to kill it.
Yeah, I know.
And then they foamed the place, and what they did is they had to actually bury the entire facility and put it under a parking lot. They couldn't even move the material. It was so dangerous. So what people need to understand, we've been playing around with these things for 7 decades, since the 1920s, that we and the Russians and other countries, especially countries like Syria and Iran, which inherited the biopreparat program, the Ebola, the Center for Disease Control, has patents, which means they've actually tweaked the virus. This latest is absolutely a bioweapon because it's not a 4 or 5 day incubation, it's a 21-day, which means now we know the virus is airborne, it can spread, it is probably not as infective as a respiratory virus like the flu, but it's a lot more infective than we want to believe, especially in an aircraft, which is a flying culture tube, a airport toilet seat if you had bloody diarrhea, or if you're coughing blood and mucus, which you can't tell there's blood in it.
Movie theaters,
any kind of area where you have close contact. And the thing is, you can be shedding virus before you get sick. The other thing is, most people don't realize in areas where there's malaria, most people that think they're getting malaria, they go down to the local pharmacy or the witch doctor, whatever. They go down to the local pharmacy, buy a drug over the counter, think that they got malaria, and they actually have the terminal phases of Ebola. And they're shedding virus like crazy. They're sharing food with each other at communal eating places where they eat with their hands, not necessarily with instruments like knife and fork, and they're spreading the virus. What's going to happen here in North America, because the public health hasn't, the World Health Organization hasn't closed airports, and we're not just talking about closing airports so people can't fly in here directly from Africa. They shouldn't get here from any airport where they've literally been in the last, during 2014, in any of these countries in Africa. So they shouldn't be allowed into the country in any way, shape, or form. They should immediately go to a what I call what's called
you're
biosafety lab.
100% correct, Dr. Bell. You're completely right.
Yeah, and the problem is that what's going to happen is nobody's going to actually track those people. Nobody's going to track these people. So as a result, when they finally do have a disaster and starts to spread like wildfire, not only in Africa but now in Europe, they're going to have a call to close the airports first, which really isn't going to stop it, to be honest, because they're going to come in boats, they're going to come in other ways, they're going to walk across the border, and some of them will seem kind of fine. They may even have a mild fever, but they're okay. It's only in the last phases that they die. So I think what's going to happen is, because we have a broken public health care system worldwide. We have it broken here in America. Yeah, we got fancy labs like Emory University, highest biosafety lab, but these are an anomaly. They need to be flown in private Airstream jets with proper air filtration systems so it doesn't infect the pilot or the personnel that move these people. And walking around with just a head-to-toe suit on without, a full air-tight system with a Scott Air pack and filters is dangerous, because if these people are spewing blood and diarrhea and everything, they are a walking cesspool, a culture tube, ready to infect you. And that's why these health professionals are at particular risk. What's eventually going to happen is they're going to run out of health professionals stupid enough to actually take care, because they don't have enough equipment in these countries. And I expect it to explode in Africa. I expect anybody coming into these countries will automatically be quarantined in Europe, which is just across the other side of the Mediterranean. And here in America, because our public health system and our bureaucracy is stupid as a bag of rocks, they're not going to do anything that I suggested to biohazardly seal off the border against anybody coming in, not just from there, but look at from Central and South America, from these illegal immigrants. And I believe we need a humanitarian thing, but we don't even properly house them. These children that are coming in, that are abandoned by their mothers as, quote, refugees. These teenagers coming in have swine flu, multi-drug resistant TB, chikungunya, Chagas virus, Chagas spirochetosis. So 2 years from now, if they've got, quote, a job that the government's managed to give them, or they're getting benefits, and they decide to donate blood for some extra cash, you have no protection in the blood supply of them actually donating Chaga specific blood that carries the spirochete parasite and cause heart failure and death. And there's no way that the healthcare system can actually test for this or other bugs that we don't even know about. So people are not asking the right questions. Our government is pretending to do something, which they aren't. They should do even more basic things that could stop this. So we'll get Tim back on the air, because I guess our phone lines, they're dropped. But I think it's really important people understand just how bad this is. This is insane. And what will happen is, very first, is probably within the next month or two, you're going to see Africa, quote, shut down, which is very bad. Nigeria is one of the largest oil producers in the world. And these other countries, when the death rate explodes, you'll see people trying to get off many of these countries and in panic, and they'll be arriving in droves without proper facilities to handle them when they arrive in their home country, like India, Europe, and elsewhere. And when that happens, we're going to have a public health crisis, because they will be spreading the bug. Even if it's not easily spread, they'll be infecting a lot of other people. And because of lack of protection, it's going to kill a lot of people as well. Yes, it won't be as bad as the swine or avian flu, but it'll be enough to panic, to shut down airports, shut down commerce, shut down travel, and allow the government and the World Health Organization to do some very bad things to us and our liberty. Especially when you go to an airport.
Not really.
Yeah, hear your response when we come back, Tim.
Yeah,
Red Death is here. Tim, your response and analysis, because who's going to benefit? Who's benefiting from the lack of action by the World Health Organization, the airlines, and the people allowing people into the country?
There can't be a human being rationally benefiting from any of this. just as there can't be a human being that can rationally benefit from causing World War III. But that's not stopping from some delightful human beings from pushing this all they can. And that's because, again, we're speaking of a spiritual battle, a non-human influence here, the influence of Lucifer, of Satan, and his minions. Can I read? It's only a paragraph long. I posted this on my blog today, just a few minutes ago. I call it Ebola the Red Death. Now, of course, the Red Death, I'm a historian, and the Black Death wiped out between a third and half of European population.
That's a good term, called Red Death, because it is red because you get a DIC and you bleed out.
Right, exactly. It was called, bubonic plague was called Black Death because of the black pustules that were all over people.
Pustules, yeah.
Pustules, yeah. Okay, now, special post, Ebola, the Red Death. Ebola is a genetically engineered biowire virus. It has been re-engineered several times to increase its danger levels and has been brought out every few years in local outbreaks to PR wrap it as a naturally occurring disease. In its latest version, it is airborne. It has a very low viral load to cause an infection. It can survive on tabletops, etc., for days. It has a small, if any, initial set of symptoms. The person infected can carry the virus for up to 3 weeks without knowing it, but shed the disease almost that entire time, and is highly lethal, killing up to 90% of those it infects. In short, it is the perfect advanced biological warfare virus. It is now spreading across the globe. It may end up killing a third of the human population, placing it on a par with the dreaded Black Death, bubonic plague of the Middle Ages, which killed a third to half of Europe and parts of Asia before it finally burned itself out as a pandemic. This is one part of the planned demonic population reduction program of the globalist. And that kind of sums up where I'm at with it.
And by the way, it may not be this particular version of the Ebola. It may be a future version where they got version A and they release version B either overseas or here in North America and say, how did that happen? There's a new genetic polymorphism that showed up. And now,
dollars to donuts, they have dozens.
It shows up more. It shows up more virus longer before you get in the death phase, I call it. But at the moment, I would say, if we don't stop the virus, we're going to see a lot of dead people in America that are flying through airports. It's a very high risk. I don't think it's that likely to survive on goods you have coming in from Africa, or sitting on a surface for days. But I do think that if you're going to a public toilet, let's say at an airport or a stadium, and someone's having bloody diarrhea, you're very likely that if you're touching that toilet, you're going to transfer it to your mouth or somewhere else, and your eyes, rub your eyes, you're going to get infected. The people that are getting infected with healthcare workers already have a reasonable amount of bioprotection. They've got face masks, gloves, etc., and they're still getting infected, which means there's enough virus airborne that it's getting around the sides of the mask. There's enough virus airborne that even if they have gloving and gowns and everything, even just basic stuff that you'd see in a third world country, it's not enough. So missionaries and doctors are getting sick, and a lot of the people, the percentage of people dying that are healthcare professionals is inordinately high, which is really bad news. It means this bug kills, even when people use some level of protection like, antiviral cleaning agents and gloves and gowns and masks and so on, it's not enough. So that's bad news. And
that's extraordinarily bad news, because I did a paper a number of years ago. I tried to encourage, I live in Indiana, and Indiana is one of about 50, of the 50 states, I think 26 of them have what's called a state defense force. And this is a military force that answers to the governor. It's not part of the National Guard. Can't be called up by the president. But some have Air Force units, some have naval units, but most of them have an Army unit. And in Indiana, we have an Army unit, used to have an Air Force unit. And Texas probably has the best system, and they have a very large they call them the Texas Medical Rangers, nurses, physicians, and so forth, who are a special unit in what in Texas is called the Texas State Guard. Anyway, I dealt with several of the generals in Indiana and the couple governors.
Why did they not do it? What did the key is?
As one two-star told me, he said it's a really good idea, but Indiana won't do it until it's too late.
Well, I see Obama, frowning and arguing back and forth with Hillary Clinton about their foreign policy. We have a foreign policy where we're supporting ISIS to do a regime change in Syria, but there's reports now in the news yesterday I read where we're afraid of ISIS doing terrorism on American soil and European soil. Come on, how schizophrenic is that? We gave a month ago 74
ISIS
Stinger missiles.
Is run by a good Jewish boy whose parents are both Jewish. He's an Israeli. He was an actor, and he was trained by the Mossad. He's a Mossad agent to mimic everything about Arab culture. ISIS is a creation of the CIA, the Mossad, and is funded by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and it's us. And when we're bombing it, we're bombing some of our own agents.
Well,
it's all part of this scam to get a general Middle Eastern war so Israel can grow into this greater Israel they want, wipe out whoever they need to wipe out. That's why you have the problem in Ukraine, because Putin and Russia, and to a lesser extent China, stopped U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran, prevented it from happening 2 years ago. About a year and a half ago, he sent a big battle fleet to the Eastern Med when we were getting very close over this bogus issue of chemical warfare attacks by the Syrian government, which they didn't do.
Right.
U.S., Britain, and Israel were going to go in. The British House of Commons also threw a monkey wrench into the works. And they want to eliminate his ability to influence events in the Middle East by getting him tied down into a major war. And all of this is so far beyond insane. I mean, insane people, you just give them a shot and put them in a straitjacket and in a padded room, and they're fine. This is far, far more dangerous.
Yeah, and we also have, of course,
the Cuban Missile Crisis.
They're even stopping humanitarian aid coming from Russia. See, the Ukrainian junta, you have it in your articles here. They're blocking it. They said there's 380 trucks heading from Moscow, south of Moscow, toward the border going to the area of eastern Ukraine are going to be blocked by the Kiev government. So this is way out of control. I can't see it going much longer before Russia does something. And when Russia moves, it's going to get devastating.
Well, I'll tell you how they can move when we come back.
Yeah, let's do that. And I think that you're probably not going to see any real military move by NATO. I think it's going to be a zero, very close to zero. Because if they twitch sideways, Russia's got some checkmates that are going to be very serious.
It's the heart of summer across America. Thoughts of childhood.
Right. I hope you're right. That would be the rational thing. But
feel like a kid.
Welcome back, and you have a quote here about the Valery Chali, deputy of Ukraine's presidential administration, on Tuesday, making the statement, "We will not consider the possibility of any movement of the Russian column on the territory of Ukraine." They're not going to allow 380 humanitarian aid trucks to arrive.
280.
Yeah, and I think what's going to happen is you're likely to see Russia finally launch something that's going to be, the war game will go live. They got. Yeah,
they're doing a war game right now in northwestern Russia near the Baltic states.
Right.
30 plus airplanes plus helicopters, and most of their transport helicopters are dual use. They're also attack helicopters, and 3,000 paratroopers. That's a perfect exercise, and by the way, it hasn't started. It will start the 15th, but that's a perfect exercise for coup de main. Now, as opposed to coup d'etat, coup de main is when a military striking force goes into someplace very important, like the capital, and very quickly seizes everything, seizes the government, and then, of course, it holds it, and it waits till it's relieved. They could well do that in Kyiv. Most of the Ukrainian army is in the south, fighting the separatists. the Ukrainian government is so corrupt and rotten anyway. But I think when the Russians decide to go in, and Putin wants to avoid it, but I think he probably sees that it's
I think the political capital he's gathered by delaying his movement has made it very difficult on the world stage to criticize him. Because now that the humanitarian aid is going to be refused by Kiev, I think he has to move militarily. I think the fact that they say they're not going to allow these trucks, which will arrive in the next day or so, to cross the border, that means they want these people, the civilians, to die, and the United Nations won't be able to protect NATO or the Kiev government from the kind of criticism that says, you really didn't give Russia any choice. They had to take a military option because you didn't allow the humanitarian aid to come in and save these people from dying from a military operation that was going to kill civilians.
I think that may well be how it plays out, and for the other side, for the Ukraine junta and the globalists and Zionists to do that is a mark of desperation. But I think they're getting very desperate because the clock is ticking on their program. Putin has been nothing but a major thorn in the side, and now that his side is infected, they want him out. They want him gone. And, they're desperate. I thought perhaps they'd let the coup or the convoy part of the way and then blow it up. Who knows? But the point is their sole strategic goal is to get the Russian military tied down into a war in the Ukraine. Now,
well, you got an interesting article here from Edgar Casey, and I've known this report going back with Edgar Casey since 20 years. The hope of the world, and it turns out Russia is a Christian nation. It is the only nation powerful enough to stop America and the West from literally a total globalist takeover by Europe and America. It's a combination with the European banks and America and their military forces combined to crush the whole world. And Russia's the only force that's large enough to actually stop them. The Chinese are building, but they're not yet. They'll be 5 or 10 years before they get strong enough and have a blue water navy, etc.
Yeah, well, that's correct, and war is fought on many levels, and the BRICS are fighting it on the economic level, and of course that's Brazil, it's South Africa, it's China, it's Russia. I'm leaving somebody out. Anyway. But they are forming a new economic system that will gut the power of the Rothschild-headed central banking empire, which includes the Federal Reserve System. But you need to keep in mind that the Rothschilds have been at this game for well over 200 years. They and their compatriots are bloody-minded to the max. And they probably want to blow up the world anyway. So they're not opposed to doing anything, including World War III, and killing most of the human race to maintain their hold on this planet. And again, if you see them as the demonic monsters I think they really are, Satan wants the war, he wants the destruction. And, of course, he lies to his minions. I think Satan's game is the destruction of the human race.
Yeah, exactly. I call him the galactic abortionist of mankind.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yes, your
doctor humor is always great. You come up with these terms.
He's here. He's here. If you were to see him from space, you'd see a picture of the blue planet, like a blue sapphire, with a picture of Satan as a doctor with a white mask, and he's going to have a suction curettage in one hand and a scalpel in the other hand, and you can see a bottle with fetal planet Earth sucked up into little chunks. Like a jigsaw babies in the suction curettage of the mortuary. That's what he plans on doing. He plans on having the Sabbatean Jews kill the Muslims. He plans on having the Europeans kill the Chinese and Russians. He plans on having the Russians kill the Americans. And everybody kills each other. And so finally Satan says, see, God, I killed all your children.
Yeah, well, as Christians, we know that it's going to get bad, but we know it's not going to end that way.
No, I know that's what his plan is, though.
And we know that in the end time that Christ will return. if he wouldn't return, it would end up that way. But
well, I think he's going to return in 3 phases. The first phase, he has to return in our hearts. We have to see that God's coming back and believe he's coming back. And he has to return literally to understand that we don't seek the truth. You're not going to see him. You're not going to understand his return. Because there's lots of false Christ. For example, a lot of people must think when Obama first got elected, we had a messianic figure. He was going to change everything. I mean, they literally had the rising sun, which is like an ancient pagan symbol of the rising new resurrected Lord. You know, they even showed pictures of Obama walking on the water in some of the sarcastic pictures from his first election. So, you know, the fact is...
when you say stuff like that, I have to remember I'm on the radio. There's so many things I could say, but I'm on the radio.
Well, you can say things without necessarily using expletive, deletive words, but we have to express the fact that we're totally disgusted by the inaction by the churches, the lies and the weakness of the government, the lack of representation by our so-called representative government authorities, congressmen, senators, in provinces like Canada. Same with the political whores in Canada, United States, Britain, Australia, anywhere. The fact is, it's the citizens are going to rise up and finally say, you know what, we're going to grab by the lapels our politicians, our pastors, our doctors, and everybody and say, wake up, this is not right. And it's not going to happen because these various different groups which are trying to protect their turf war protection. It's going to be because the citizens get so fed up with the lack of the people that we rely on doing what they're supposed to do that we're in such a terrible mess. So I think that things are going to get worse. I expect whatever's going to happen in Europe and in Kiev will probably be very harmful to the economy. I think eventually that will come out of it, though, and the thing that I expect is the opposite of what people think, which is an economic collapse and the Black Death and so on. I think there are going to be enough dead people they can get total control, just like at 9/11. I don't know whether that threshold is 100,000 or 1 million, but they want enough dead and blood so that they can get total control. So if you go to a stadium or you go to a shopping center, or you go to an airport or a bus or a train or whatever, you're going to go through massive security, body cavity searches, ultrasound examinations are added to make sure you don't carry a bomb or a bioweapon.
And then that RFID chip in your hand makes sure they know who you are. You're not some air sneaking in.
And if they don't have an RFID chip stuck in you, you'll be biometrically scanned. We even have to give a drop of blood and go through a DNA biochip, which I saw at Affymetrix in Chicago in Oak Ridge National Lab, building number 10. In 1999, I was there.
Yeah, they've been working on this stuff for some time.
They have it all ready in Warehouse 13, ready to roll. Welcome back, and Tim. So, as I said sarcastically at the beginning of the show this hour, I said, I'll bet Tim has got really good news. And I'm going to use a little bit of dry humor here. I would have to say, how about this? The first good news is we're one day closer to seeing Jesus. Second good news. Second, I'm being religiously sarcastic here. Second good news is people are avoiding the truth at a what I call an alarming rate. Whether we're talking about electro pollution, Fukushima, the economic chaos that's coming, America supplying weapons to our potential enemies, and they're concerned about terrorism on American soil by ISIS, but yet at the same time they're run by Mossad agents trained to be false Muslim agents of this so-called Islamic group. We are arming them. Now we're bombing without any congressional approval. I haven't heard of any committees. In fact, I think they went on summer recess right before they decided to start.
Yeah, I don't think the War Powers Act has been invoked. And yet
I think, in fact, actually,
in combat.
I think that the most important act that the American government does is when they go on vacation, they're less likely to approve or disapprove of anything, which means they have no guilt. So as long as they don't have guilt, no matter what the dictator-in-chief does or his bureaucracy, Congress doesn't have to worry about any guilt because they're actually playing golf and building sandcastles.
I would say that we all need, when we meet our senators or congressmen, we need to give them hell. We need to tell them that they're a lying sack of you-know-what. They're traitors to the country, to the people of the country. They've allowed the globalists to saddle us with trillions in debt, to ship 50,000 of our largest factories overseas, to get us in countless wars. and to do nothing about Fukushima, which is killing the entire Pacific Ocean, which a big part of our country abuts against. They still haven't cleaned up the mess in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
When I put my blog together every day, and I try to do it within 3 or 4 hour period.
By the way, all those toxic chemicals are still down in the Corexit.
Oh, yeah.
In the Gulf of Mexico. So we still have...
And all kind of weird microorganisms are growing because of them.
Right.
I mean, it's
They're still using it, apparently, at the wellhead down at the bottom of the ocean, not the surface. So those chemicals are still bioaccumulating in the Gulf. The oxygen level is still low, which is why Australian jellies have taken over large parts of the Gulf. They haven't fixed it. And so what they're trying to do is make sure it doesn't make the beaches look dirty, so tourism doesn't stop. But the fact is, it's not safe to eat seafood from the Gulf of Mexico.
No, it's
just
not.
like it's not safe to eat shellfish from the West Coast.
No, it's not. I love fish, but because I can't be certain if I go in a restaurant where it's from, I usually don't eat fish anymore.
Well, what you do, you just get an Inspector Plus, about $700, and if your fish goes click click, you back away from the fish counter or the restaurant table. You just back away and make sure you don't turn your back on the fish in case you decide to strap it to your back with Velcro, so you take the radioactive fish out with you when you leave the restaurant. The key is that you have to approach everything now with a sense of humor. Either that or you're going to lose your marbles. Because when I look at the news every day, and we have solutions for health, for example, with Ebola, we have nutraceuticals that can knock it out very effectively. It doesn't matter if it's Ebola, avian flu, fungus, bacteria, mycobacteria, TB. We have things that will do it now. We've had our defense wipes for years because they knew that they're going to use a bioweapon. Years before, we had the declaration in 2005 and 6 of the United Nations and World Health Organizations to take over. I got the documents in 97, March 16th, from HLI, Human Life International, physicians and PhDs that actually met with me privately in their boardroom in Zurich, Switzerland, and smuggled out the documents right out of the World Health Organization. These globalists have got no ethics. They have negative ethics. They have satanic ethics. They are actually working lockstep to bring about the end of the human race. And people say, oh, no. And they're very patient. They don't need to do it next month or next year. They're just step by step. They've been massaging Ebola since the 70s. Now, of course, if a new version comes out that now it's 21-day incubation, which people should say, that seems unusual. It never was like that before. And if we start seeing that, we start seeing people in regular hospitals dropping dead of Ebola and say, well, they thought they came in with a mild fever, but they came through the emergency last night in Atlanta or Rockford, Illinois, or wherever, and all of a sudden, everybody else in that emergency department started having fever and chills and bloody diarrhea within a couple weeks, including all the health professionals. What are you going to do when health professionals will start ripping through hospitals?
When I did my paper years ago and presented it to the authorities in Indiana, saying, look, this is what we need to set something up that we can deal with a naturally occurring pathogen, a pandemic, or a biowar pandemic.
Right.
And one of the biggest things is Billy Bob gets sick. He's got a little stomach ache, and he's not too bad. And then it clears up kind of, and then all of a sudden he starts to crash. And depending on how the disease was put together, the viral, how it was genetically engineered, it may be a hemorrhagic fever, it may be something else. But he starts to crash, and he dies. But in the meantime, he's been spreading the disease. Now, he went to see his doctor, and his doctor said, well, okay, I'll give you this, blah, 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 and that's $75. Don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out, and take this trip.
Usual stuff.
Yeah, the usual stuff. Only the doctor, he didn't have a mask on, and the receptionist didn't, and all the gals working in the office didn't, and all the people sitting in the waiting room didn't have a mask on, and Billy Bob, he sneezed a couple times, here and there. And
all over the magazines and over the toys. And the front desk.
Well, okay,
and reception
sure,
girls.
But, it was no big deal. You don't even
and the
think about it.
And the phlebotomist drawing blood, and all over the tie for the doctor, who has now got the tie of death.
Well, a lot of doctors have ties of death. They've done some studies on ties that are really gruesome. But now it's the tie of death, yes. because he's got an advanced biowar virus on it. And now a whole bunch of people that work there and have gone through there and have dealt with this are now exposed. And guess what? They get a little stomach ache, or maybe they get a headache, or what other, some of this stuff, it has no symptoms early on. And then they begin shedding it. And pretty soon you have a geometric problem. If I give you 2 pennies today and double it every day, it won't take too long before you'll have all the wealth of the world. And you think, oh, that's insane. But you keep doubling, you see, and doubling and doubling. And pretty soon, it starts slow, but pretty soon it builds very quickly. And that's the problem you have with with biological warfare, advanced biological warfare, a pandemic. But also, it's the people that die off early on, and that's the healthcare professionals. So Dr. So-and-so that saw Billy Bob and all these other people, they get it. And they may not be the first ones to get it, but in less than a month, they have it, okay? And then they're dead. And what are you going to do when half the doctors have kicked the bucket, and half the nurses have kicked the bucket, and half all the pharmacists you went to and got in his face and said, I don't know what's wrong with me, here's his script, and all these people that you've dealt, they're dead. And then you've got a whole bunch more people all of a sudden very sick, but half the people that are supposed to be taking care of them are dead, and 10% of those physicians that are left said, I'm out of here. I'm finding a hole and I'm crawling in it and I ain't coming out. And, all of a sudden, you're up a well-known creek without a paddle. And that's where we could be headed with the Red Death. Now, is that going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball. But here's what I can tell you. It's genetically engineered. It's a biowar weapon, and even the U.S. government says it's a biowar weapon. It's now spreading. Maybe it'll be contained, but I'm not liking what I see so far.
Well, I think it's exploding right now in Africa. It probably has been percolating for 2 or 3 years at least. So my guess is we're probably a couple of years away from it really taking off exponentially here in North America, even with a leaky border. But once enough cases happen, it has what's called a geometric exponential explosive growth. And that doesn't include the possibility of new polymorphisms occurring, especially when it gets to countries where there's high levels of radioactivity, naturally exposing hosts like in Japan or elsewhere. These bugs are very likely to become much, much more aggressive. So who knows? All I can say is in Africa, it's a now thing. In America, it's going to kill a bunch of people and change our way of traveling dramatically. This year and next, it's going to get a lot worse. You're going to go through real super high security.